Okay. Okay, The Crown and the Republic, the legacy of the Anglo-American literature. I will explain later why this is the title of a review session today, but if you see, we're just going to be talking about the legacy. Okay, what the most essential things that we have inherited from Anglo-American literature. So there's a catch here. What we will be talking about right now is the Anglo part. Okay, the Anglo part. That's part one. American literature, I have decided that I will record a video. I will record a video lecture on that, and then I'll send the link to Dr. Reyes for you to watch before I give you the post test. So that's going to be around anytime this coming week. Okay, again, our focus today is English literature, the Anglo part. The American, I will be recording that lecture because that's another in-depth discussion, and we cannot squeeze it to what we will be discussing today. So that will be for another date, but we focus on English literature today. Anyway, going back to the title, The Crown and the Republic, the legacy of Anglo-American literature. Okay, let us look at our targets. Let us look at our targets for this review session. Okay, so before we jump into the topic or the review session proper, there's a video that I want you to watch. Okay, so now you will be familiar with it. So here's the link as you can. Okay, here we go.
What is reality? Knowledge, the meaning of life. Big topics you might tackle figuratively, explaining existence as a journey down a road or across an ocean, a climb. What is reality? Knowledge, the meaning of life. Big topics you might tackle figuratively, explaining existence as a journey down a road or across an ocean, a climb, a war, a book, a thread, a game, a window of opportunity, or an all too short-lived flicker of flame. 2,400 years ago, one of history's most famous thinkers said life is like being chained up in a cave, forced to watch shadows flitting across a stone wall. Pretty cheery, right? That's actually what Plato suggested in his Allegory of the Cave, found in Book 7 of the Republic, in which the Greek philosopher envisioned the ideal society by examining concepts like justice, truth, and beauty. In the allegory, a group of prisoners have been confined in a cavern since birth, with no knowledge of the outside world. They are chained facing a wall, unable to turn their heads, while a fire behind them gives off a faint light. Occasionally, people pass by the fire carrying figures of animals and other objects that cast shadows on the wall. The prisoners name and classify these illusions, believing they're perceiving actual entities. Suddenly, one prisoner is freed and brought outside for the first time. The sunlight hurts his eyes, and he finds the new environment disorienting. When told that the things around him are real, while the shadows were mere reflections, but gradually his eyes adjust, and finally at the sun, whose light is the ultimate source of every recovery. But he is no longer used to the darkness, and has a hard time seeing the shadows on the wall. The other prisoners think the journey has made him stupid and blind, and violently resist any attempts to free them. Plato introduces this passage as an analogy of what it's like to be a philosopher trying to educate the public. Most people are not just comfortable in their ignorance, but hostile to anyone who points it out. In fact, the real-life Socrates was sentenced to death by the Athenian government for disrupting the social order. and his student Plato spends much of the Republic disparaging Athenian democracy while promoting rule by philosopher kings. With the cave parable, Plato may be arguing that the masses are too stubborn and ignorant to govern themselves. But the allegory has captured imaginations for 2,400 years because it can be read in far more ways. Importantly, the allegory is connected to the theory of forms developed in Plato's other dialogues, which holds that, like the shadows on the wall, things in the physical world are flawed reflections of ideal forms, such as roundness or beauty. In this way, the cave leads to many fundamental questions, including the origin of knowledge, the problem of representation, and the nature of reality itself. For theologians, the ideal forms exist in the mind of a creator. For philosophers of language viewing the forms as linguistic concepts, the theory illustrates the problem of grouping concrete things under abstract terms. And others still wonder whether we can really know that the things outside the cave are any more real, confident in what we think we know. Perhaps one day a glimpse. Will you break free to struggle towards the light, even if it costs you your friends and family? Or stick with comfortable and familiar illusions? Truth or habit? Light or shadow? Hard choices, but if it's any consolation, you're not alone. There are lots of us down here.
Hello, everybody. Are we done watching the video? Now, let me ask you, because you're English majors, right? You're storytellers. And ask you first, what is the story about? Like, what did you understand from this allegory? So, Dr. Levy, what did you understand from this story?
Good morning, sir. Um, what I have understand the story is people don't believe others people, or I can say that it's really hard to make people believe with your ideas, like what the caveman did when their friend went back from the outside, sir.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Mark. So, okay. The question was, what's happening in the, yes, thank you. What's happening in the allegory? Who are the people there? What situation were they in? What happened in the duration of the story? So the allegory of the cave see two cavemen who've been chained inside a dark cave for a while, and suddenly one of them is set free and gets a chance to see the outside world. I think there's three of them. So one of them is, took to the outside world and saw how the things that they used to see were only shadows of the real things. Because back when they were inside the cave, they only saw the shadows. And now that he has been set free, he could see the real things. He comes back, tells the other cavemen what he saw. They wouldn't believe him, and they were afraid that he might be becoming a threat, because introducing new knowledge can cause a lot of people to feel uneasy and uncomfortable. So they hurt him just to shut him up. So one of the things that it shows is, as Mark has pointed out, that people can be uncomfortable receiving new knowledge, especially things that they expect they already know. Like the cavemen, they already know that there are birds through the shadow of the birds, but they just haven't seen birds yet. And sometimes when we're learning, even when we're already teachers and we've been studying for a long time, there are things that we need to take a second look at or look from another perspective. And it could be hard to push ourselves to do that because, you know, we've studied for a long time and some of that pride has built up. So it's important that every time we're willing to empty our cup and to let our inhibitions go and just be like a child, like a sponge, absorbing as much as we can, okay, and then just making our judgments later. And this exercise is like that. It's like coming out of the cave for all of us because there are things that we will see and discover from another perspective. So for you who are still with me, please if you have a sheet of paper, I want you to number it 1 to 10. We will be having a bit of a warm up here, okay? So if you see the screen now, you should see warm up. So first question. Which of the following English authors wrote the Canterbury Tales? Charles Dickens, B. Geoffrey Chaucer, C. John Gower, D. Sir Thomas Malory. And anyone, what's the correct answer? Anybody? The correct answer is Geoffrey Chaucer. Okay. Number 2, to be or not to be. Where is this from? A. Hamlet, B. King Lear, C. Macbeth, D. Romeo and Juliet. To be or not to be? 'Tis the question. Brother, 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortunes. Does anybody know the correct answer?
Hamlet, Sir Hamlet.
Correct. It's Hamlet. Okay. Next. In what rhythmic pattern is the English sonnet written? A. Anapestic trimeter, B. Dactylic hexameter, C. Iambic pentameter, or D. Trochaic tetrameter. Okay, correct answer is letter C. Iambic pentameter. Next, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain and the pursuit of happiness. Is that from the 19th Amendment, letter A, the Declaration of Independence, the Emancipation Proclamation, or is that from the United States Constitution? Does anybody know the answer? This statement in front of you comes from the Declaration of Independence. American literature now. Next. Which of the following lines is alliterative? A, and all the air in solemn stillness holds. B, boom, crash, pow, quack, moo. C, I came, I saw, I conquered. D, Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. What's the correct answer? Okay, alliteration is the use of a similar consonant sound in the beginning of the words in a line. So which one is the alliterative line here?
D, sir.
Correct answer?
D, sir.
D. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers, because it all starts with a P, with a P sound. Now, letter A is what we call consonants, because it repeats a certain consonant sound within the lines, okay? So we have all solemn stillness holds. We repeat the L sound. Letter B are onomatopoeias, okay? These are onomatopoeias, creating a word out of the sound that a thing makes. Boom, crash, pow, quack, moo. I came, I saw, I conquered are parallel structures, okay? These are all sound devices under poetry. Please remember that. Next, What iconic American novel was written by Harper Lee? A. Little Women. B. The Last of the Mohicans. C. To Kill a Mockingbird. D. Uncle Tom's Cabin. What's the correct answer, English majors? The one that was written by Harper Lee is C. To Kill a Mockingbird. If you've heard the name Atticus Finch, the attorney that defended a black man from a white accuser, that comes from this story, To Kill a Mockingbird. There's actually a famous quote from this story. It is a sin to kill a mockingbird. That's where it gets its title. Okay? Okay, good. Next, which of the following best describes American literature? A, literature of Latin America. B, literature of North America. C, literature of the American continent. D, literature of the United States. And the correct answer is United States, when we say American literature. Next, which of the following best describes English literature? A, the literature of the British Isles. B, the literature of England. C, the literature of the United Kingdom. D, the literature of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth realms. Next, which of the following works exhibits diaspora? A, the Atonement. B, the Chronicles of Narnia. C, the Lord of the Rings. D, Things Fall Apart. However, the correct answer here is Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. So you may be asking, what is diaspora? Diaspora is this condition where you are separated from your mother country. You're separated from your mother country, and then you are displaced, or you migrate to another country. Next. Oh, say, can you see the Star-Spangled Banner, the American national anthem, was originally a poem by Francis Scott Key that depicts a battle between the Americans and British forces. What is the title of this poem? So the Star-Spangled Banner was a poem, actually, or is a poem, and it's just sung as the U.S. national anthem. What is the original title? A, Defense of Fort McHenry. B, Oh Captain, My Captain. B, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. D, The Raven. This should be a no-brainer. Should be very easy. Look at the choices. Correct answer here is The Defense of Fort McHenry. Okay? So we're done with the warm-up. That's only warm-up. Could you believe it? So I ask you to do that thing on paper. Before we continue any further, I want to know what your scores are. So could you count your scores right now and tell me what they are now? Okay, somebody got 5, somebody got 6. Again, not a bad way to start, okay? Not a bad way to start. So let's move forward to part 1. Okay, and part 1 is English literature. We will not be covering American literature today. Again, let me just repeat that I will be recording that lecture. I'm going to be giving the link to Dr. Reyes anytime this coming week, so you can watch that before I issue the post-test for this, okay? So part 1 is English literature, or as the people who reside up there, English literature. This is very good to know. So we're going to be talking about English literature. Very first is the definition. What is it about? Right? English literature, according to Encyclopedia Britannica, the most proper definition we can give you today, is it's the body of written works produced in the English language by the inhabitants of the British Isles, including Ireland, okay, from the 7th century to the present day. That's a long time, okay? There are others who would argue this, however, okay, the study of works written in the English language. Again, so there is this definition. When we're talking about the works themselves, the literary write-ups, they're the body of written works produced in English in Great Britain or Ireland, or any of the British Isles surrounding them, okay? But if we're talking English literature in this manner, if you're getting English literature as a major or as a discipline to study, it is simply the study of works written in the English language, okay? But the definition that we'll be looking into today is the first one, okay? Any English language published written work from the British Isles. Are you still with me, English majors?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Oh, sir.
Okay, what are the British Isles? So here I got a map for you from our very handy dandy Encyclopedia Britannica. So these are the British Isles. That's Great Britain. Okay, so down here, it's England, and the capital of England is in London. And when you go somewhere, I don't know, here or there, I go to Cockney, and they talk like that. In Wales, I can't invent how they talk because it's really hard. So we have Wales, and then we have up there the Scotland, okay, the Scots, want to be a Viking, Scotland. So up here is Scotland, and then Northern Ireland is still part of the UK, okay, and then we have the Republic of Ireland. The one that did not join the Union and became its own republic. So these are the British Isles. Any work written in English that comes from these islands, English literature, okay? If you want to know how Irish people sound like, watch an interview of Saoirse Ronan. Okay, and we get to the meat of, go to the main course. This is the main course. English literature, history, development, and notable work. So all I need you to do right now is to pay attention, to listen. If I ask you to read to help me out, please do. And if you have questions, kindly note them. I will entertain them after we finish the lecture, okay? So we can save time. So once again, English literature, history, development, and notable works. Are we still together, English majors?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I told you I missed this. I really do. I used to do this a lot when I was an English major myself, still an English major. Anyway, that's an overshare. I shouldn't be sharing personal stuff. This is an academic, professional thing. Whatever. Okay, so ta-da! These are the English literary periods, and it's quite a tour. So all I need you to do is to pay attention, please, if you can. So we divide it into 11 periods, okay? First is Old English literature from the year 450, 1066. We're talking AD here, okay? So AD 450 to 1066. Sir, what's AD? AD is Anno Domini. Some people say Domini. So that means year of dominion. Whose dominion? Dominion of the Lord Jesus Christ. That's why you see on the certificates on graduations and recognitions, the year of our Lord, year of dominion. So we're talking 400 Old English literature, 450 to 1066, Middle English literature, the beginning of modern English. Okay, the Stuarts and the Puritans, Restoration literature. The Stuarts and the Puritans, this is the period when England, the everlasting monarchy as it seems, became a republic. So we'll talk about that later. And then Restoration literature, it's called Restoration because this was around the time that the monarchy was reinstalled or was restored. Have the Augustine age, the age of Johnson, not Johnson and Johnson. We're not talking about vaccines. We're talking about literature. And then Romantic literature. Okay. All right. So teachers, you're going to be very busy in your profession. You find some time for romance. Alrighty. Victorian literature, named after Queen Victoria. Of course, the 20th century, the century that's just passed, and the century that we belong to. So we're going to be looking into which people shaped the literary sphere and what works were published, what developments happened, how did history coincide with the literary tradition, so on and forth. Let us begin. So, can I have the valedictorian, Mark Levy, kindly read this for me.
Old English literature, also known as Anglo-Saxon period. The Old English period was marked by
Anglo-Saxon.
again, sir.
Anglo-Saxon. Period. Go on.
Okay, sir. Anglo-Saxon period. The Old English period was marked by the influx of Saxons and Anglo tribes invading Celtic England. The so-called Dark Ages, which is during 455 to 799 AD, occurs when Rome falls and barbarian tribes move into Europe. Franks, Ostrogoths, Lombards, and Goths settled in the ruins of Europe, and Anglo-Saxons and Jutes. Sir, am I pronouncing it correct? Jutes or Jutes?
Jutes.
Jutes migrate to Britain, displacing native Celts. The Britons into Scotland, Ireland, and Wales. The Britons were vivacious lovers of novelty and brave, but ineffective in practical affairs, and had a somewhat fantastic but sincere and delicate sensitive to beauty.
Okay, thank you. Levy, so before we dive in here, you see that this is a full paragraph you're reading right now. This is a PowerPoint. It's supposed to be chunks, okay? Well, I imagine that your English majors, you should not be averse to reading paragraphs, long or short. Just a little tip of the trade, once you're already teaching, some researches show that using PowerPoint with, the little words all the time might not be that beneficial, especially if your students are just developing their knowledge of syntax. Syntax is how words are arranged. If you remember, their knowledge of how the language works as a flow, okay, of ideas, it may interfere with that because all they see are chunks. Now, I'm not saying stop using PowerPoint that way, because there's a certain technique, okay, that employs that, which is, I think it's the picha pucha, right? So you can use that technique, but what I'm just saying here is, if you're using PowerPoint with just, the topic, the summarized version of what the lesson is, better to have them read the entire text first, or better have them a copy of what the PowerPoint is about. So for example, there's an essay by George Orwell, Politics in the English Language. Give them a copy of that, the whole copy, ask them to read it if they can. But in your PowerPoint, you just have the main ideas. Okay, that's the better practice versus just showing the main ideas on PowerPoint. Okay, so I hope that we get to adopt that when we are already in the battlefield of teaching and shaping young minds. All right, so the history and therefore the literature of English peoples began in this era, 450 to 1066. It started to be well documented, 1066 onwards, by certain Germanic tribes that we call the Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes. The English we know today is not the English that they had back then. Okay, if you look, if you search for Old English on Google right now, you look for a sample, you would not recognize the language in front of you. You would not know what is this? Is this Russian? Is this Greek? What is this? Because the language they spoke is not the English that we speak today. English evolved over time. Okay. What else can we get from this? Okay, I want to call Romer or Romar. Could you read this for us?
English, as we know it, descends from the language spoken by the North Germanic tribes, who settled in England from the 5th century AD onwards. They had no writing except runes used as charms, until they learned the Latin alphabet from Roman missionaries. Anglo-Saxons were converted to Christianity in the 7th century. It was only after this transition that the Anglo-Saxons could shift to the development of written literature apart from their literature being oral in nature.
Thank you. So our takeaway from this is before the 7th century, the Anglo-Saxons didn't have means to put their literature into writing because they used just the oral tradition, passing stories, literature, history, tradition from the mouth of the older generation to the younger. But when they were converted to Christianity by Roman missionaries, they were given the Latin alphabet by which to write in their language. And that's how we begin developing. That's how we see written English literature written. Okay? And you might recognize some of them here. Is any of these works familiar to you?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, the Beowulf.
Are you familiar with Beowulf from the book or from the movie where Angelina Jolie was Grendel's mother? Or both?
Book, sir.
Okay, good. So anyway, here, not all, but some of the notable works from this period. So we have the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle by King Alfred the Great. So works by Kenilworth, Cadman's Hymn, and the Ecclesiastical History of the English People by Venerable Bede. Okay, from the Old English literature, we move on to Middle English. Okay, Middle English is divided into two parts. We have the Norman French period and the late Middle Ages. So what does the Norman French period represent? So in the year 1066, Norman French armies invaded and conquered England under King William I. What happened as a result? It is very known in the history of colonialisms that a country that colonizes or invades the new country that it settles in. So that is what happened to England. It became a trilingual country. What languages were spoken there? Then it was Latin, mainly the language of the church, okay, and French and Anglo-Saxon, which evolved to be English today. So the language that this tradition resulted in was known to be Middle English. So the next period is the late Middle Ages. That's supposed to be letter B. So it was Geoffrey Chaucer who introduced the iambic pentameter. Okay, again, the iamb is unstressed, stressed syllable. Okay, so it's like a heartbeat. Dug, 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 dug. Okay, so what is an iambic pentameter? From the prefix penta, we have 5 iambs in one line. 5 feet of iamb in one line. So dug, 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 dug. That's an iambic pentameter. And then the rhyming couplet. We're going to talk about that later when I show you Sonnet 18. Okay, and also, it was during this time that Sir Thomas Malory contributed Le Morte d'Arthur. Okay, the story of King Arthur and the Round Table has been known to, he did not come up with this. It's been known to those people during that time, what varieties of that story. It's just he had the privilege of putting it into paper, and he's credited for it. Okay, so Thomas Malory for Le Morte d'Arthur. Next, so what are some of the Middle English literature notable works we see? So by ways we have the Roman de Brut and the Roman de Rou. Okay, and of course Le Morte d'Arthur by Sir Thomas Malory. Okay, the Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer, a Confessio Amantis by John Gower, and Piers Plowman by William Langland. Anyway, focus. So, the beginning of modern English. You look at the terms early Tudor or English Renaissance period. So, what is Tudor? There's not one door, so there's, I'm sorry. Okay, Tudor is the house to which the family of Queen Elizabeth I belonged. Okay, so they're called House Tudor. You know Game of Thrones, right? Daenerys is from House Targaryen. Jon Snow is a Targaryen, but there is like a story that he was taken away from his family because he was about to be killed, whatever, when he was a baby. So anyway, it's like Game of Thrones. If you remember the story, there's House Targaryen, the Starks, House Starks, the Lannisters, House Lannister. And then there are different royal houses. And even in Greek in Greek mythology, there are different royal houses, the house of Atreus or Agamemnon, the family of Agamemnon came from. So in reality, in English monarch history, there are houses as well. And Tudor is the royal house from which Queen Elizabeth hails. And Queen Elizabeth I, because of her unwillingness to marry and therefore inability to produce an heir, she would be the last from the House Tudor to become a monarch. Okay, so what do we see in the beginning of modern English, in the English Renaissance period? The War of the Roses ends when Henry Tudor claims the throne. Okay, so we see Martin Luther. This was the time as well of the Reformation, where Martin Luther published his 95 Theses, okay, which are actually antithetical ideas to the teachings of the Roman Catholic Church. So that gave birth to a Protestantism. Okay? So one of the poets from this period is Edmund Spenser. Let's go to the Elizabethan period, or I'm going to say it like Winston Churchill says it, very fancy. Elizabethan period. Okay, so this is the reign of Queen Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen. So she saved England from the Spanish Armada. All right, in the 1580s, Spain was threatening to destroy England, and England was at the time was not as powerful as it is now. But under the leadership of Queen Elizabeth and under the leadership of her general, when she announced war against Spain, they were able to confuse the Spanish Armada, burn the ships, make the rest flee back to Spain, and then they destroyed Spain. Okay, and this put them atop the world powers. This victory. This victory gave Queen Elizabeth enormous popularity and gave England enormous respect from the rest of the world that is known during that time. This was also called two Kate Blanchett's movies on the Elizabethan period, one from the 90s and then the other one from 2007, I think. The title is also called The Golden Age of England. Okay, so there is a term that I'm going to introduce to you. Have you heard of the word hegemony? Hegemony. Hegemony. Have you heard of this word?
Not yet, sir.
Okay, so hegemony corresponds to a group of people that holds the power, the most power in a certain area. When England defeated Spain in that dramatic battle in the 1580s, they were the hegemonizing power. They had the power, so they had the fame, had the popularity with their political power rising, with their economic force being bolstered. Their culture, arts, and literature followed. So it's a two-pronged sword. If Shakespeare published around this time, but Queen Elizabeth and her armies were defeated, I think we would not have Shakespeare today. Or maybe we will have Shakespeare, but not as revered and popular as he is. So it's very important that when you're learning literature, you know the history surrounding the publishing, the writing of the piece that you are studying, because it helps you put things into context. Why is Shakespeare so popular? Why did it endure his influence? Because his works were published during the Golden Age. Okay, it's like a match made in heaven. Okay, so this was also the time where people were being disillusioned, okay, because they were given an opportunity to take a stand for themselves now, economically speaking. So the middle class was beginning to gain power. Trade and commerce were becoming full enterprises. And then there's international and global trade going on. So power is being distributed to the people now, not because the monarchy has given it to them, but because they're gaining an economic grasp of the society. So we can implore here, or we can invoke here what people usually say: money is power. Because here the middle class was beginning to contribute more to society financially, and so they're having more of a voice now. Okay, what else happened? So, okay, you can just read this on your own. Spirit of optimism, unlimited potential, because this was the golden age. They were high. Okay, they were in this honeymoon period. Like, we had this victory, we have all this advantage around us, we have on. It's a wonderful time to be alive. So that was the attitude of the English subjects back in those days. Okay, so the Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes were Germanic tribes. When they arrived, or when they arrived in the British Isles and displaced the Celts. And tribes had the reputation of being barbarians, uncivilized, savages. But when this age came forward, they were not seen as barbarians anymore. They became seen as this commercial power. There's an idiom, a shining city on a hill, because of that victory by Queen Elizabeth and the results that reaped for the country afterward. Okay, so the dominant forms of literature were poetry and drama. So we have lyric poetry, which is more about the emotions of a person. You remember we have at least three forms of that tell a story. The lyric poems. The lyric poems are usually sung. They borrow their name from the instrument lyre, because you usually recite them or sing them with instruments, and they're about expressing feelings, your thoughts on certain poetry. Okay. There's also another one called descriptive poetry, which is said to be about describing nature, the beauty of nature, of creation around you. So for others, that is a separate discipline. But mainly we have three: dramatic poetry, lyric poetry, and narrative poetry. During this time, it was lyric poetry that was thriving. And then elegy, okay, which is giving respect to a certain person, usually demised. Okay, tragedy, and the pastoral. Pastoral doesn't mean pastor like in church. This corresponds to life in a rustic life in the farm, agriculture. Pastoring originally was a verb used for shepherding sheep. Okay, shepherding sheep. So that's why we have the term, I think in Filipino, pastol. All right. But over time, the other usage became shepherding people, guiding people, like you're shepherding sheep. Then some ministers in non-Catholic religions, we call them pastors, specifically the Protestant religion. So near the close of the English Renaissance, we have John Milton, who composed Paradise Lost. Okay, so this touches on the fall of Adam and Eve from the garden. So the themes are still very religious during this time. Okay, you can just read this for yourself. The discipline of the sonnet came from Italy with Francesco Petrarca. So that's why we call the Italian sonnet Petrarchan sonnet as well. But because of the preeminence of England during this time, they introduced their own. So later we will be looking at the differences between the English sonnets and the Petrarchan sonnets. Let's have a review. Okay, so first great English dramatist, you might want to take note of this, was Christopher Marlowe. Okay, so before the 16th century, the English drama was representations or adaptations of Bible stories. Okay, some of the notable works here. You can read the rest, but most popular, of course, are the Shakespearean plays and sonnets. Sonnet 18, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Midnight summer's, the midnight summer's dream, Romeo and Juliet, Merchant in Venice, these tragedies by William Shakespeare. Okay, and the rest of the ones that you can read here. So just very quickly, I will not be digging into each of these anymore in detail because we're running out of time. And they promoted Puritan values, like, you know, purist. They were concerned about keeping yourself chaste before marriage, revering the church, revering the teachings, biblical teachings. However, we can't count out though that easily believing people were taken advantage of because the government were incorrectly using these principles to assert power over their people. Okay, so during this time, John Donne and Francis Bacon, inventor of the essay. Okay, and then Mr. Donne wrote short love poems. Okay, and they are called the metaphysical poets. Some works by Ben Jonson, Paradise Lost, and the King James Bible, or the Authorized Version, which was published in 1611 of England, who replaced his cousin, Queen Elizabeth I. You remember Elizabeth I refused to marry and therefore did not have any children. The translation of the Bible into English. So that is what we have as the King James Version. And then we have the Restoration period. This was when Oliver Cromwell, and to reinstall the monarchy, was summoned back to England and made king. So that's why we call this period the Restoration period. There are two kinds of plays that sprung or that became so powerful and known during this time: the comedy of manners and the heroic tragedy. Okay, so if you remember, they just came from the Puritan era. So this is sort of a reaction to their very chaste, very pure look at sexuality. So this is where they challenge that with a comedy of manners, dealing with issues of sexual politics among the wealthy and the bourgeois. Okay? So it is their examination of morality during that time. People professing to be moral and trying to assert their morality over others. What right have you? So it's what they're dealing with during this time. Okay? Some of the notable works during this time, this was also called the Age of Dryden, because John Dryden was so popular. That's an opportunity for you to look into. Go research that. Okay? Okay, let's move forward. So the Augustine age is a short 50 years. All right. So this is marked by the imitation of epics, of classics, by Virgil and by Horace into English. Okay, letters. So this was called the pseudo-classical or the neoclassical periods. Also the emergence of what we call the Epyllion, which is also called the Little Epic, because what the English were doing was borrowing these classics from the Greek tradition, from the Roman tradition, translating them into English and compressing them into shorter narratives. So that's why it's called neoclassical, meaning new classical, or pseudo-classical. Pseudo means not really classical. was Jonathan Swift, okay, who's one of the best writers of satire. So his best work is Gulliver's Travels, okay. What is agreed to be the first English novel was called Pamela by Samuel Richardson. Pamela's about a girl that works for a certain man in a certain shop, and the man was making sexual advances towards her, but she refused, and as a reward, she was married into a higher ranking person. Okay, so we have some great works from the Augustine age, okay, and all of that we can see here. I would want to pay attention to Alexander Pope as well, and Daniel Defoe, Samuel Richardson, and Jonathan Swift. Although, of course, if you have the time and the resources and the interest, try and read about all of these things. Okay, and then the age of Johnson. So this is the transition from neoclassicism to romanticism. So this is an in-between era. So during this time, we published the dictionary, or a dictionary of the English language by Samuel Johnson. That's why it's called the Age of Johnson. So when he published this, this was around the time that he was given his master's degree in Oxford. Okay, and because of this, a dictionary of the English language, we have the dictionaries that we have now. It became a basis for the dictionaries that followed. Okay, so we have works by Oliver Goldsmith, Richard Brinsley, Edmund Burke. Kindly look into these yourselves. Okay, we have Romantic literature. So what are the markers? What happened during this era? During this era, happening was the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, the French Revolution was happening down in France, okay, when they got rid of King Louis. So during this time, Victorian literature, the markers are the eminence of the British Empire, the British socioeconomic reforms, and the rise of the novel as a form of an empire. Because during this time, 25% of the world was under British rule. Okay, British society is still reforming. Okay, and also this was a time that prose rose. There was a time when the novel as a literary form became extremely profitable and even leveled with drama and the all-beloved poetry. So some of the best works during this era are Scrooge, Ebenezer Scrooge, the one that was visited by ghosts of the Christmas past, present, and future. Just for him to realize that being alone doesn't mean you have to be bitter, and you can still enjoy people having their Christmas. Okay, he had to be visited by 3 ghosts to realize that. And of course, Oliver Twist. Okay, Nicholas Nickleby. Different works of Charles Dickens. Also, Charles Dickens is responsible for the ISBN, this system of numbering books. He's responsible for that as well. Okay, so we have Vanity Fair, very thick book by William Makepeace Thackeray, if I pronounce that correctly. It's a really, really thick book, if you see it. Okay, Mary Barton. Okay, Elizabeth Gaskell. The works of the Brontes. Some people say Bronte, but the diacritic mark, those 2 dots, we call those diacritics, up above that E, they really mean long E. So the works of the Brontes. So these are sisters, actually. So Anne Bronte was famous for, amongst other novels, The Tenant of and Emily Bronte for Wuthering Heights. Ooh, sister goals, sibling goals, right? They're still known for that, even after even after more than a century has passed. Of course, the poetry by Lord Alfred Tennyson, works of the married couple Robert Browning and Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Elizabeth Barrett Browning, particularly popular for How Do I Love Thee? Let Me Count the Ways. You remember that? And then we have treatises or nonfiction prose or essays published by natural philosophers. Scientists back then were called natural philosophers. One of them was Charles Darwin. This was when he published his work on the origin of the species by means of natural selection, where we get the theory of evolution. So, the 20th century. What are the important events happening here? The accession of King Edward VII, because by this time Queen Victoria had already died, and also World War I. So common works or notable works were Modern Utopia, Old Wives' Tales. Let me explain though that these writers are called Edwardians because they wrote under the reign of King Edward. So what they did was the works of the latter part of the previous century, say the 1870s and 1880s, 1890s, they tried to revive in the beginning of the 20th century. So basically, these are just retellings of stories that were already told in the past, in the latter part of the past century. But that evolved with modernism and World Wars I to II with notable authors. We have Ezra Pound, Wyndham Lewis, D.H. Lawrence. Look up their works, please, for your own benefit. It's really a great learning experience. T.S. Eliot, especially, William Butler Yeats, and James Joyce Ulysses. Okay, and then also post-war world. Yeah, the post-war world. So I already mentioned earlier the dystopian Lord of the Flies by William Golding, Animal Farm, 1984, but by one of my favorites, George Orwell. Okay, you should read these. The works of C.S. Lewis, the Chronicles of Narnia, and some essays on medieval literature and as well as Christianity. And then the Lord of the Rings trilogy, The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, The Return of the King by J.R.R. Tolkien. He is BFF with C.S. Lewis. Could you believe that? And then the plays of Samuel Beckett. And also, let's include popular British films and music. And let's not deny the Beatles. Seriously. I'm including that. All right? And we have the 21st century, the new millennium, and the Harry Potter series by J.K. Rowling, and then the works of Ian McEwan, particularly The Atonement and Saturday, amongst other works. So we've made it to the 21st century. Can you believe it? All righty. So what can we thank English Lit for? Okay, some of the forms of literary art we've gotten from them were the alliterative verse, which again uses alliteration instead of rhyme or strict metric patterns. The blank verse, which uses the iambic pentameter but doesn't use rhyme. And then the heroic verse, which uses iambic pentameter or dactylic hexameter to apportion or appropriate itself to narrative poems like epics that deals with the adventures of heroes. So great, like say Beowulf. Okay, of course the theater drama came from Greece, from Athens specifically, but it really flourished. It became prolific, successful, and it also became profitable, meaning playwrights actually earned money writing them during the Golden Age, most especially. So, especially the Shakespearean plays. Okay? The English and Spenserian sonnets, the novel, the essay, and the treatises, or nonfiction writings and criticisms. So just a quick differentiation. The Shakespearean sonnet and the Spenserian sonnet are both English sonnets because Shakespeare is English and so is Spenser. However, when people say English sonnet, they most automatically think of William Shakespeare. So anyway, what are the differences between these three? Again, the original is the Petrarchan sonnet, adopted by the English into their own. So the Petrarchan sonnet, all of these sonnets are written in iambic pentameter. Okay? So, sir, what is iambic pentameter? How does that translate to real life? So, for example, this one, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? So, here, these are, I will put in bold these stressed syllables. Okay, so here we have a pattern of unstressed shall, I, dug, okay, shall I. So we have one, this is an I am, unstressed, stressed, another I am. So we have one, that's one I am, two, we have three, four, right there, and here, 5 feet of I am. That's the meaning of iambic pentameter. So, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? That's what it means. Thou art more lovely and more temperate. That's iambic pentameter. Okay? Then, so here is where it's different. In the Petrarchan sonnet, there's one octave and then one sestet. So remember that sonnets have 14 lines, just 14 lines. The difference is how they're divided. In the Petrarchan sonnet, it's 8 lines. One octave is 8 lines to 6 lines. Sestet, so 8 to 6. In English sonnets, both Shakespearean and Spenserian, there are 3 quatrains, so 4, 4, 4, and then 1 heroic couplet, 2. 3 groups of 4 lines, and then 1 group of 2 lines. So 4, 4, 4, 2. And then same with Shakespearean sonnet. The difference is the rhyme scheme. Okay? Shakespearean sonnet famously follows the A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, G, G. So here, day rhymes with May, temperate rhymes with date, okay? And however, in the Spenserian sonnet, A, B, A, B, B, C, B, C, C, D, C, D, E, 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 okay? And it's also different for the Petrarchan sonnet. The sestet here, or the 6th-line stanza, can use either this rhyme scheme or this one, but the octave remains here. Let me just explain this rhyme scheme. So A, B, A, B. This is the first quatrain. See, day, May, temperate, date. This acts more like an I rhyme to me. They don't sound the same, but they look the same. And then C, D, C, D, so shines, declines, dimmed, untrimmed. So this is our second quatrain. So fade, shade, oust, gross. Our 4th quatrain, our eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. This is the heroic couplet. Of course, we owe them the English language, obviously. The English dictionary, English translations of the Holy Bible, and the English translations of the classical literary canon. They have contributed to the world monarchy, constitutional monarchy, Puritanism, Romanticism, Republicanism, conservatism, progressivism, among many others, right? This is a map of the United States of America. This is a precursor to part 2, which I will record and make available for you on YouTube. Now, let my tips boil down to these 6, okay? So number 1, be prayerful and really faithful, okay? Pray, 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 and be intentional about passing, all right? Also, review. Review with a review center if you can afford it, if you want it, go for it. A review in both ways, in both active and passive ways. Be sober-minded, okay? And this is not for everyone, but I would suggest do not let the exam stop you from teaching. Do not let the exam stop you from applying. Because first of all, I believe you can do it. Then take the test, leave God with the rest, trust Him, okay? All right, everyone, thank you so much for staying in this lecture. I enjoyed you very much, and I hope that you learned something from today.